I had a conversation with someone who has been a victim of a narcissistic relationship, and she had she felt like the work would be like what psychologists call uh, spiritual bypassing. That's the feeling she had in the situation that she was in. And so it feels it has something to do with what you just said, but maybe you can talk a
Absolutely.
bit more about that in that
Yeah.
situation, in such
I think
situation.
this, what's that?
Yeah, in such situations, like when people are really victims, like
Yeah. Yeah.
what, how can we do the work without spiritual bypassing? That's actually the question, I think.
hmm hmm Yeah. I think this kind of situation is the most delicate one here. This is the most, uh, uh, I guess, you have to be especially aware of how you're using the work when you're in a, say, narcissistic relationship. And my assumption is if you are in a narcissistic relationship, that you're probably taking the role of not standing up for yourself and being the pleaser that goes hand in hand with narcissism on the other side. So the work is going to say, okay, judge your neighbor. So judge this narcissistic person and go through the process. And they're going to come to turnarounds, which are going to say, okay, well, uh, he or she is abusing me or something like that, right? And you will turn it around and it'll say something like, I'm abusing myself, and or I'm abusing that person, or they're not abusing me. And this is where I could see where the mind could go in the direction of spiritual bypassing and just say, okay, well, really, there is no real problem here, and and even to the extreme of it's all my fault, which would fit perfectly with the person who's a pleaser in a narcissistic relationship, and they would just take it all on themselves and say, okay, everything's fine. I'll just suck it up and no change. But if there really is a victim, like if someone is actually being abused, then uh, it would seem natural to want to come out of that abusive situation. That would be what anyone would tell you. So, am I using the work to stay in something that's actually hurting me? Where I go with that is look at the very first turnaround, which is I'm abusing myself. I'm the one staying in the relationship. And this turnaround, if you hold it right, can actually show you that I don't have to continue abusing myself. Um, and if I do choose to stay in the relationship, there may be ways of not abusing myself within a narcissistic relationship. So the work, as I mentioned before, it's never about making decisions, or it's not about the action part of getting in a relationship or getting out of a relationship or anything like that. It's an internal thing of how do I see the situation. The more I see myself as a victim, the more powerless I feel and the less action I'm able to take. So it might be that someone does the work and they don't take much action, but they're starting to see their situation less and less as a victim situation, even though the abuse is still going on. And that may be the way that they're becoming stronger to be actually able to stand up and say, no more, I don't want to continue that. The other thing that sometimes comes to mind for me is that we label these relationships so quickly, like narcissistic relationship, and this is a bad relationship, this is an abusive situation. And there's a whole scale of that, right? There's full physical, sexual abuse, and then there's minor abuse, and there's a whole range in between. And I think it's very, it's what the work does sometimes is slow it down and just look at it. How abusive is it actually? How bad is it? And when I look at it more objectively, again, just going back to the last point, then I'm more able to think, okay, is this actually serving me or not serving me? Sometimes a narcissistic relationship can actually be serving me because it's helping me to learn how to stand up for myself in small ways in a very challenging kind of situation. So the thing about the work is it doesn't have any right or wrong. It doesn't say this is the right way to be in a relationship, this is the wrong way, you should be out or you shouldn't be. There's no morality per se in the work. It's just checking in. Where am I? Where do I want to be? And if I'm holding that, then doing the work is not going to make me bypass. It's going to actually do the opposite. It's going to push me into where I need to be looking and really considering and looking at the hard questions. And some of it may point me in directions that I may not even have the courage to act on, but it's going to start pointing me in that direction. So, yeah, this is one of those areas where it's easy to it, it's it's subtle, I guess is the right way to say it. It's subtle. Um, as I do the work on someone who I think of as abusive, I will naturally soften towards that person. I will naturally see them as a human being, not as a monster, even though they may be doing terrible things. I will be more gentle in my heart towards that person. But ironically, when I do that, I may be opening the possibility for actually leaving that situation if that was what was needed. So whether I stay or go, again, doesn't matter. It's how I experience it. And what someone else would say is terrible, another person would say that is okay for me. And so we can never judge another person. We can never tell if someone really spiritually bypassing or not. But you can tell if you are spiritually bypassing. That's the cool thing. It all comes down to me. What is my experience in a situation? Am I spiritually bypassing? How can I tell? Because it feels false, it feels fake, it feels like I'm lying to myself or I'm trying to uh, convince myself to do something that's not true for me. Um, and so if you notice that, then question any thoughts that would stop you from or that would make you keep on bypassing. Just keep trusting your stress. Your stress will show you where you're off. And you can't judge by what other people will think, but for yourself, your stress will say, hey, that's not right. And so you can trust that. And then, yeah, I guess I'm correct myself. It's like you can trust that the stress shows me there's something in here that's off, something that isn't right for me. And so I'll question my thinking, and then my action is going to be much more natural on that basis. So it's very similar to what we were just talking about, trusting your own instincts. Like my instinct is get out of here. Is that coming from stress or is that coming from just clear observation? And the work will take the stress part off. But if there's still a clear observation to get out of there, then why wouldn't I get out of there? Yeah. And you can question the reasons why I think I can't get out of there, right? That person is going to chase me down. That person is going to, it's going to be worse if I do that. Like, can question those. Another thing for people that are in narcissistic relationships that are on the more pleasing side of it, there may be need also to do the work on self beliefs as well, not just on judging the other person. And sometimes there's so much self putting oneself down that you may need to do some of those pieces of work just as one-liners as well. So anyway, those are a few ideas just speaking generally about this topic, but tell me, is there anything more that you're thinking of as you're listening?
Um, I think what you said is really helpful in some kind of the next phase or so. It's in this phase, it seems to me that she's still trying to recognize that she really has been a victim. Like, when people come out of a narcissistic so it's over, so she's already gone. But now, only now, it's dawning to her that she's really been a victim there. And so when you want to do the work, then it's kind of what you said.
Uh-huh.
It's as if you take it on you while you were already taking it on you. So
Yeah, so that's where I wouldn't
it's like
necessarily question the
recognition. It
fact.
needs, yeah, it needs like the being a victim first needs to be recognized before you can handle it. That it's something in that phase that she is.
Yes, yes. So this is where people get confused a lot in the work. They try to question a fact, and it is a fact. And so then they're like, what do I do with that? This is where it goes back to explaining away things, which is not actually the purpose of the work. So if something is just a fact, I was in an abusive relationship or I was in a narcissistic relationship, then that's just an observation. Okay, great. Good to know. I'm finally coming out of finally becoming aware of something that I wasn't aware of before. Where the work can come in is if I see, oh, I was in a narcissistic relationship and that was a terrible thing, or that was like, oh my God, what an awful thing. Like then the stress is now another layer of stress is coming on top. Then the work can work on that was a terrible thing. Is it true? Or uh, what a what a bad thing that I was in a narcissistic relationship. And the turnarounds are very different. It's like I was in a narcissistic relationship and that was a good thing. Why? Right? And it can open your mind to that was part of my experience that I had to go through to get to the point now where I recognize what a narcissistic relationship is. I've experienced it, and I'm much more less susceptible to it moving forward. So there's always the truth part, and then there's the interpretation part. The truth part you can question, but I often just don't question the truth part at all. It's just true. I question my interpretation. So I was in a narcissistic relationship is the truth part, and then the interpretation was, and that was a terrible thing. So I'm going to question that and see where I go, and it's going to be giving me a um, different kind of experience in doing the work. So that would be more of a one-liner rather than a judge your neighbor worksheet.